MAGA Republican stunt completely backfired after Democrat Representative Joe Neguse exposed their hypocrisy to the entire Congress.
Mr. Smith, you've said several times in your deposition that you believe that the facts and the law, your interpretation of the law, would lead to a conviction of President Trump. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you believe that same thing, that your interpretation of the law, your reading of the law, would have resulted in the conviction when you went after Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell back in 2014? Did you believe it at the time?
I did believe, and
ultimately you got a conviction in lower court, but that was overturned by the Supreme Court, correct?
yes, the Supreme Court changed the law on what constituted an official act. And
Actually,
as a
that's
result,
incorrect.
that conviction was overturned.
That's incorrect. They applied the law, and they said in their ruling, our concern is not with tawdry tales of Ferraris, Rolexes, and ball gowns. It's instead with the broader legal implications of the government's boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. A more limited interpretation of the term official act leaves ample room for prosecuting corruption while comporting with the text of the statute and the precedent of this court. They accused you of using a boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statutes. Now, did you believe when you went after John Edwards that your interpretation of the facts and the law were correct and that you would convict John Edwards of corruption?
Yes.
But in fact, that case resulted in a jury deadlock on 5 charges and acquittal on another charge. Is that correct?
That is my recollection. That's correct.
Let's move on to the court's interpretation of your gag order requests. Mr. Smith, America was founded on the principle that the government doesn't silence political speech, in particular speech before it happens. You sought a prior restraint against President Trump without a single violation of pretrial release. In fact, there was no real-world harm that you could articulate justified giving the federal government the power to silence him as a presidential candidate, was there?
The court granted those motions and found that the prosecutor did not have to wait until someone was harmed to make such a motion.
Actually, the request was rejected when the case was actually, when you actually were not able to, it was restricted, correct? The gag order was restricted, correct?
Well, we filed for an order in the district court. The district court granted an order. President Trump appealed that order. The Court of Appeals absolutely agreed that there was a basis and that the threats to witnesses that came from the targeting by Donald Trump were real and that we had a duty to protect them. You are correct in that the Court of Appeals narrowed the order, so the order covered witnesses, court staff, the judge, and my staff. The difference was that it didn't cover me anymore, which I was fine with.
Did you have any evidence that President Trump's statements about the cases against him intimidated witnesses or prevented them from coming forward?
I had evidence that he said, if you come after me, I'm coming after you. He suggested a witness should be put to death. The courts found that those sort of statements not only deter witnesses who've come forward, they deter witnesses who've yet to come forward.
But you weren't able to identify a single witness who didn't come forward because they were intimidated by President Trump.
We had extremely thorough evidence that his statements were having an effect on the proceedings that is not permitted in any court of law in the United States.
Don't you think it's a pretty low bar to clear if you're trying to silence a candidate for president? I mean, if you can't identify a single witness who's intimidated, that maybe you should reconsider the gag order?
Both courts upheld the orders, and it is not incumbent on a prosecutor to wait until someone gets killed before they move for an order to protect the proceedings.
Did anyone on your team raise concerns that this expansive gag order you were seeking would infringe on President Trump's First Amendment rights?
My recollection is that we, of course, discussed First Amendment issues regarding this application because I and my staff respect the First Amendment, but the First Amendment does not allow one to make statements that interfere with the administration of justice in a judicial proceeding. My interpretation was supported and agreed upon by the district court, and the Court of Appeals in terms of the phenomena of the statements being made, targeting individuals, causing threats to happen to them. I would also add, sir, that in the days after Donald Trump made some of these statements, the district court, in this case, received vile threats to the district court's life. In that environment, I felt a duty as a prosecutor to make that motion, and I make no apologies.
And the court stayed that motion on August 3rd, 2024. I yield back.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to our country. My colleague from Virginia, who's a Republican colleague who was questioning you right before the break, do you know what he said in the days after January 6th? Let me share this with you. This is a quote of his from a press release on January 8th. Congress stands united in our rejection of the violence that occurred this week, and I'll continue to urge the swift prosecution of those involved to the fullest extent of the law. Mr. Smith, this is theater. Republicans are trying to rewrite history. That's what this is. Many of them were with us in the House chamber on January 6th. I remember it well. The chairman was there, as was I. There's been a lot of discussion about witnesses today. Perhaps the chairman could muster the courage to call the 4 witnesses who I see, the American public may not see, I see standing behind you, Mr. Smith, the 4 police officers who risked everything, life and limb, to do what? To protect the Republican members on the dais. It's an outrage that they now sit here and have the audacity to try to rewrite history in front of the very officers who sacrificed everything to protect them. Mr. Smith, you're of course aware that President Trump was impeached for his conduct connected to January 6th, right?
Correct.
Do you know how many members of Congress voted to impeach him?
I don't recall.
232. Do you know how many Republican members of Congress voted to impeach him?
I don't recall.
10 Republican members of Congress voted to impeach him for his conduct related to January 6th, including at the time, the sitting Republican chairwoman of their conference. There was a trial in the United States Senate. Senators sat as jurors. I remember it well because I was one of the prosecutors who prosecuted that case. Do you know how many senators voted to convict President Trump of high crimes and misdemeanors during that trial, Mr. Smith?
I don't recall.
57 senators. Do you know how many Republicans voted to convict him?
I don't recall.
7 Republican United States senators voted to convict President Trump of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was the most bipartisan vote for conviction of a president in the history of the Republic. So they can engage in as much histrionics as they want to try to rewrite history. But facts are facts. They talk about weaponization. They accuse you of weaponization of the justice system. While the Federal Reserve Board chairman rings the alarm about political retaliation by this Department of Justice. Mr. Smith, I don't know if you're aware of this. I don't know if your counsel has made you aware that President Trump is live tweeting, I guess you call it truth socialing, as we speak. Are you aware of this, about this hearing?
No.
Let me read to you what he posted an hour and a half ago. Deranged Jack Smith is being decimated before Congress. It was over when they discussed his past failures and unfair prosecutions. He destroyed many lives under the guise of legitimacy. Jack Smith is a deranged animal who shouldn't be allowed to practice law. If you're a Republican, his license would be taken away from him, and far worse. Hopefully the Attorney General is looking at what he's done. We have a word for this. It's called weaponization. It's called corruption. Mr. Smith, if you care to respond, I'll give you an opportunity, but I will simply say we are grateful for your service to this country. We appreciate your fidelity to the rule of law, and I would echo the comments that have been made by my Democratic colleagues to ignore the noise that you hear from so many of my colleagues who would debase themselves in this way. It is, in my view, subversive of the oaths that we took to defend the Constitution. I'm happy to give you an opportunity, Mr. Smith, if you'd like to respond.
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you for your service. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2010, Mr. Smith, did you work for the President Obama's Department of Justice?
Yes, in 2010, I was the chief of the Public Integrity Section.
During that time, did you have any contact or connection with Lois Lerner with the Obama IRS?
Yes, I was new to the Public Integrity Section. I was the chief. I was trying to learn about issues I had not been at.
Did you attempt to work with Lois Lerner and the IRS to investigate nonprofits?
What I did was I asked for a meeting with the IRS about nonprofits.
So the simple answer is yes.
Well,
correct.
I didn't ask to work with Ms. Lerner. They sent Ms. Lerner. That's the person who came to this meeting. I met her once.
And they went after Second Amendment groups, correct? If you remember correctly, that's what was the offshoot of it, that Second Amendment groups that tried to gain nonprofit status, they were slow-rolled through the IRS. Do you recall that?
Separate from this, there was an investigation of that that I was a part of in Public Integrity.
Did you, you prosecuted Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, this was asked earlier. You prosecuted him, correct?
I was part of the prosecution, yes.
And that ended up with a, that decision ended up being unanimously overturned by the Supreme Court, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Yeah, including Justice Ginsburg joined in on that opinion, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. You also prosecuted John Edwards and Bob Menendez, and those both ended in mistrials, is that right?
The John Edwards case did. The Menendez case, I had left the Public Integrity Section by the time that case was tried. I wasn't.
So, Mr. Chairman, what we heard from the other side here is that this gentleman is the gold standard for prosecution here in the United States. So think about it. We had a witch hunt done by the IRS going after Second Amendment groups, unanimously overturned by the Supreme Court. Prosecuted two prominent political figures, and they ended up as mistrials. That's the gold